Call this meeting to order. Please take the roll.
Ms. Langford? Here. Ms. Ellsburn? Here. Ms. Anderson? Here. Mr. Barron?
Here.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
Here.
Ms. Newcomb? Ms. Boson?
Here.
First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. May I please have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for September 15th. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I would like to move approval of the 9:15 regular meeting agenda.
Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes with 4 yes, 0 no, and 2 abstaining.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to move approval of the 9:15 organizational meeting agenda.
I'll second that as well.
Please vote.
Oh, sorry. I pushed the wrong button. I meant to push yes. Oh, is it?
There we
Got
go.
it.
And the motion passes 6-0. Now I'd like to recognize the district, or the superintendent for district recognitions.
Good evening, Board. I am pleased tonight to recognize 14 high school seniors who have earned one of the top national honors for academics. These students, representing East, Hoover, Lincoln, and Roosevelt high schools, have been recently named as 2016 semifinalists for the National Merit Scholarship. The National Merit Scholarship competition, now in its 61st year, selects students based upon their strong performance on the preliminary SAT or PSAT exam. As semifinalists, these students will be considered with others from around the country for scholarships totaling more than $32 million. And being named a National Merit Scholar opens the door for other support from colleges and universities. More than 500 DMPS students have been named National Merit semifinalists over the past 6 decades. This year is one of the largest number of National Merit semifinalists at DMPS in a single year. In fact, it is the largest this century, and it is the first time 4 different high schools have been represented among the honorees. The academic opportunities provided to our students in Des Moines enables them to compete with the best and brightest in our state and nation. Being recognized as a National Merit semifinalist is a great honor for these 14 students as well as for their teachers. Congratulations to them and their families. I appreciate that this is a very busy time of year for our students, but I would like to invite our National Merit semifinalists who could join us this evening to step forward along with their principals to introduce our students and to share a few words. Scholars, come on up.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Kevin Biggs, principal of Roosevelt High School. It's my honor to be here this evening and introduce to you the fine scholars from our high school. We are very, very proud of their efforts. They are tremendous students and scholars, but they're also very involved in other activities, as Dr. Ahart said. They are musicians and philanthropists, athletes, and they give so much to our community. And they're artists, and they have so much creativity in their brains, and we learn as much from them as they learn from us. So it's my honor to introduce from Roosevelt High School, Matthew Wells. Matt, step forward. Helena Grunsteidel, Isabel Alloway, and Jack Wallig.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Flush, the principal at Hoover High School, and it gives me great pleasure to stand before you and recognize Hoover students. Tonight we have with us Nathan Ryder. Matthew Borland was unable to attend, but again, as Kevin said, these are young people that you love to write letters of recommendation for. They make our jobs very, very easy. So Nathan.
Good evening. My name is Paul Williamson. I'm the principal for Lincoln High School. And to follow up with Mr. Biggs, Brian Richter, our student for Lincoln High School, is no exception. He is an outstanding scholar, but also very active and a role model for our student body, and is involved in our music programs as well as our athletic programs. So Brian Richter.
My apologies, I didn't see him down there. Also from Roosevelt, Will Gunderson.
Congratulations, you're representing DMPS and your family is exceedingly well. Thanks for being here tonight.
Okay, the next item on the agenda are the consent items. Do I have a motion?
I have the motion. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized and certified by the secretary and approved for payment by the board chair in the amount of $5,309,117.31, unpaid bills in the amount of $2,295,543.27, and procurement card payments of $754,133.68.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Boson, second by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for up to 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information desk to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. We appreciate your input. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion and deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to the agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among board members at the board table, with the speaker's comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determinations as deemed necessary. Are there any speakers?
No.
Any discussion? I do want to make note of some comments that Natasha Newcomb passed on. She's taking her son to the airport right now. She does plan to join us later, but she was not able to be here for the beginning part of this meeting. She had comments and questions on open enrollments. She believes that those should not be a part of the consent agenda because it's a parent's request and in belief of for the education of their child, and so believes that should never be regular business. Her notes to me on the school resources agreement, or the SRO, School Resource Officers Agreement. She's received feedback for and against this program. Do we have any feedback from the schools and parents? Are there any standards set out for when the SRO should be called? Are there any expectations for the SRO to the school to build positive working relationship with the parents and the students? I wanted to share those for the record. I think we can make sure that she gets answers to her questions. Is there any further discussion? No, please vote. Motion passes 6-0. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. I'll call that hearing into order. Will you please present the matter?
I recommend the board hold a public hearing, approve plans and specifications, and award to the lowest responsible bidder, Woolen Mechanical, for the base bid and alternate one in the amount of $161,100. Publication of the public hearing was included in the Des Moines Register on September 26th, 2015.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval.
And second? Is it?
Yeah.
Before folks vote, I have another comment from Natasha that I'd like to pass on. And I know she did give an opportunity to share her questions with Bill Good, but she did note that Wolin's bid was much lower than the others, and asked Bill about why that was so different. Her concerns are that they'll turn around and state that they cannot do it for that bid. I know just from being up here that hasn't been the case that I've noticed, but those are good questions, and I know she got a chance to talk to our Chief of Operations before the meeting. Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. I'll call a public hearing to order for the cafeteria addition at Findlay Elementary School. Please present the matter.
I recommend the board review the proposed plans and specifications prepared by Studio Malay for a cafeteria addition to Findlay Elementary School, hold a public hearing, and approve the plans.
I'll let you turn it. Good evening. My name is Barbara Adams. I'm here representing the staff and students at Findlay Elementary. Thank you so much for this time to speak to you. I thank the board for recognizing the need for this addition of a cafeteria multi-purpose room, and also thank the community for supporting this effort with statewide penny. This is the first year within this 5-year plan, and appreciate the fact that we have this exciting addition in our works. Of course, you know Bill Good, our Chief Operating Officer, and I'd like to first begin to introduce Curtis Ayler. He is the project architect with Studio Malay, and will share a bit of the plans and a sneak peek for you. Oh, maybe? Yep, there we go.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you, members of the board. Again, I'm Curtis Ayler with Studio Malay. Personally, this project's close to my heart in that I was involved in the 2013 renovation project at the same building. So anytime you get to be involved with the same building a couple times is very rewarding. Here's the site plan for the school. The orange portion indicates where the new addition is slated. On over here.
We'll share.
You're all right. This is the existing portion of the building that was renovated in 2013, and on the south end is where the new office was added on in 2013. And then here's the new addition. The idea here was to place the cafeteria close to the playground and blacktop areas to have that nice duality between food and a recess. Not only does this help define its own use as a multi-purpose space, an assembly space, but it also, by separating it from the existing building, we were able to keep windows that we had put in the last project into these new classrooms. Maximize daylight is always a good thing. So the other thing that we did was it minimized the contact of the new addition to the existing building. At this location, we're going to need to have a firewall, and by minimizing that contact, we can make it a much simpler construction and a lot cheaper construction. You'll notice that there's a fairly large walking trail around the north part of the playground. This trail currently exists. It's in high use by the community, and the intent was to relocate it slightly to the new addition, but to still maintain it as it's a pretty important part to those neighbors. Moving into the floor plan, you may have noticed in the last slide that there was a dumpster enclosure and a loading area off of Cambridge to the east. Part of the intent is to put all of those sort of back-of-house services on one side, and all of the students will be exiting out these doors and the current doors to the north that are further to the west. This should leave us with a clear separation between the kids and any dump trucks or food trucks dropping off supplies. You can see that the The floor plan consists of 3 major components. There's the kitchen, which will have improved food prep equipment. Then there's the multi-purpose assembly room in the middle. These tables that are shown here are collapsible tables. They can be folded up and then moved into this table storage room. The idea here was to maximize the ability to use the space in different ways. It's a very flexible space. That way it could be used for caucuses or after-hours events, whether someone wants to set up chairs or have the tables and have it more of a cafeteria style. And then, of course, the third component, which is the raised platform or stage. And it should be noted that the raised platform and all of the areas are accessible through ramps, so they are ADA compliant, and the whole addition is fully accessible. Last slide shows the exterior elevations. The idea here was to maximize the amount of north light. So most of the windows are placed here on the north elevation. Not only does that look out on the playground and a lot of that green space, but you also get good lighting through the north. It reduces glare and allows us to not have window coverings, which can be problematic in a cafeteria atmosphere. The intent was to blend a lot of the materials with the existing building. Most of the current building is sort of a reddish-brown brick and a dark bronze metal. The idea here would be to match both of those materials and then also have sort of a burnished block, which is also a very durable material for those lower tan portions. With that, I'll turn it back over to Barb and Bill.
Thanks. What'd you hit here? Right here?
Yep.
So it looks like a gorgeous addition, doesn't it? Findlay is a beautiful school. What I'm more interested in is what it can do for our students. So the first thing is, it has some real instructional benefits. You saw this flexible space. Well, right now we have a gym, cafeteria, meeting place all in the same room with a climbing wall on one side and a basketball hoop on the other and a tiny little kitchen window that we don't even use anymore. With this space, we have this flexibility of instruction. So we aren't bound by a schedule issue that we are right now, serving lunch to all of our students, stopping PE classes, cleaning up the space, and then beginning again. So having one room kind of puts a stop in the middle of your day with a schedule that has a flow. Second thing is, you saw that this space looks very versatile. And you know that Findlay was the first turnaround arts school, and you can certainly see the effects of that. Now, we have the most students taking band and orchestra in any elementary school. I won't talk about who we beat out as far as high schools, but it is a strong part of our day. And so there are fine arts nights for every grade level. We have drama club. We put on a musical every year. And with this space, the stage allows for us to highlight our students, highlight our programming, and have a speaker system now that doesn't mean we always have to walk down to North High to put on a production. The second great thing about this is it helps us with our programming. So with I Have a Dream adopting Findlay as a Dreamer Academy, it's brought community supports into Findlay that go beyond our school hours. So starting in 2 weeks, we again bring families, adults in from the community, and they're receiving their high school diploma program at Findlay. We have a new partnership with the Grub YMCA. It's called the Dreamer Laboratory. And the YMCA provides not only childcare, but after-school enrichment and field trip programming and things for our neighborhood that our students haven't had before. And we have a very strong parent-teacher organization. So if you come to Findlay on a potluck night, not only will you be well fed, but you'll see our gym packed. And these two things, you want to go back and show that stage again? These two things help us do something at Findlay that we haven't been able to do before. Now we'll move ahead for Bill.
Okay, this particular project, again, tonight we're reviewing the final plans. We hope to award the bid on November 17th. Construction on this facility, this addition, would start in the spring 2016, and it's our hope that we will be completed by early August, so they'll definitely be able to use it during the 16-17 school year. And the project budget on this is $1.9 million. So with that, this particular presentation, the link to this presentation is on the screen there and on our website, should anybody want to review the plans or the presentation. But at this point, Mr. President, we would be happy to field any questions or comments.
Are there any questions or comments?
Just have one. Great plan, much needed. How many other grade schools still have cafeteria gym?
How about if I send that to you? I don't
Yeah, that'd
have
be
that
fine.
particular number in my head.
Because there's
There
quite
are
a few of
more.
them.
Yeah. I had the same
There's a
Probably not
number of
that
them.
many, but yeah.
But in
Okay.
our 5-year plan, we're addressing
Yeah,
most or
those.
all of those.
Okay, yeah, as long as we know they're being addressed, but I
They
didn't
are.
think there were that many left, so.
Anything more?
No, I was going to ask the same question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Do we have a motion? We don't, I believe.
We didn't have a motion.
Move approval?
Second. Sorry.
Thank you. Please vote.
Okay.
Broke it.
It's my fault. It's all my fault. Thank you. The item passes 6-0. Our next item on the agenda is the middle school math monitoring report.
Good evening, board, and especially a welcome to our new board members. Congratulations and thank you for your service. I'm Tim Schott, Secondary Schools Executive Director, and we are pleased, in fact, we're very pleased to bring you 2 monitoring reports tonight. The first one will be on middle school math, the second one will be middle school science, and we're going to meld and combine a few elements, and I'll tell you when that's happening so you'll know when we're crossing over. Part of the reason why we're so excited to bring this report to you is because this is our core mission. We exist for student learning. And anytime we can be in front of you to share evidence of that occurring, we believe that's key. And so the way that works in our district more and more and more is through collaborative efforts between the Office of Schools and the Office of Academics, sitting together, literally sharing this report for you. That's obvious, and Noelle Tickey and Christy Donald will talk more specifically about their roles in that collaboration. But I want to take a second to point out sort of the less obvious collaboration. And this is a piece that I won't redo for the science part, so it covers both. And that is our friends in business and finance, for example, who not only provide the funding to allow our schools to operate at high levels, and you'll see the results of that here in just a minute, but also the data and the data integrity that you're going to see tonight in terms of our student performance. Operations. Key to student learning are clean, safe facilities, transportation that gets students to and from school on time, food that is nourishing and learner-friendly, and our human resources department, who's quite literally in charge of our most important resource, and that is our talented staff. So without the collaboration of all 5 of our departments, we really could not be coming to you with the success in middle school math and science that we're going to bring you tonight. So I thank them. They're back there somewhere. With that, I'm going to introduce Noelle to share a few KPIs.
Good evening, Board. My name is Noelle Tickey. I'm Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. And former board members, I hope you'll be patient with us. We are going to spend a little more time maybe going through some of the definitions of proficiency, some of the KPIs, and in an effort to bring our new folks up to speed with how we start to interpret this data. So I'm not sure when this happened, in a work session, a board work session, you all had identified what are those kind of key performance indicators that you wanted us to report out to you on an annual basis so that we can start to monitor progress over time. So the KPIs for middle school math that we wanted to really pay close attention to were the percent of students completing Algebra 1 by 8th grade with a C or higher, so we define that as successful completion by 8th grade. The percent of students proficient on the state accountability test in grades 6 through 8. So you're going to see collapsed data looking at that whole span, 6th through 8th grade. And the percent of students making or exceeding typical growth on the state accountability test, which currently is the Iowa assessments. So then we've provided additional data points beyond those KPIs that go a little bit deeper with each one of those and look at really important subgroup information as well, because we want to look beyond, are we growing all kids, but then are we growing students within our subgroups as well. So we do want to take a minute to talk about how the state defines proficiency, and essentially what they do is they set the bar at a certain level and say, for this grade level, this is the proficiency bar. So what we're reporting on tonight is the percentage of students who have met that expectation or exceeded that expectation. So when we talk about percent proficient, that's what we're referencing. Then we also want to look at typical growth, knowing that proficiency is a high bar, and it's going to take some students years to get to, but we also want to look at, are they making that typical year's growth? So in 7th grade, we expect them to grow this much. Did they grow that much? Or did they exceed that? So when we look at our typical growth percentages, that's what we're looking at, is the students who have met or exceeded that typical growth expectation set by the Department of Education. So here's our first KPI, looking at the percent completing Algebra 1 with a C or higher. And you can see that we have steadily increased over a 3-year span. Looking at where we were in 12-13, we were about 87.79% meeting that C or higher proficiency bar, and jumping up to almost 95% in 14-15. And so that's something that we've paid close attention to. Excuse me. This next graph, again, it's grades 6 through 8 collapsed data. This is looking at general proficiency overall, so what percentage of students met that bar set by the state. And as you can see, over a 3-year period of time, we've increased from 56% to about 60%, a steady increase of about 4.63%. This next graph looks at our typical growth, and this is something that we'll always have a close eye on. Some context for you, and this is the case with all of the data that you're going to see from last year to this year, is that we had a form change. So when you look at the data from 13 to 14, we see a pretty significant jump, but we also know that there was a form change during that year. So we have that's a factor. We're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. It's more like apples to oranges. But we can compare 2013 to 2015 because that was using the same form. So when you make that comparison, we are up slightly from about 55% to about close to 59% of students making typical growth. Now we're going to dig in. Those were the KPIs, but we want to look at those KPIs now by subgroup information, because as I said before, that's really how we start to look at the health of our system. Are we not just making growth or meeting increasing proficiency for all kids, but what's that look like by subgroup? So here's our participation by subgroup. This data has caused a lot of conversation in the past week or so. This is not a trend we wanted to see. It is our goal to expand the number of students who are reaching Algebra 1 by 8th grade. We have a bit of a challenge presented to us by our Department of Ed, and they require us to maintain entrance criteria for all students to award high school credit when they're in middle school. So what we've done, for example, in our high school courses where we have AP expansion, we've said, all kids, we want you all, we'll support you, we want to support you in this rigorous, challenging work. We don't necessarily have that option in middle school because the state requires us to put criteria on students to allow them entry into that Algebra 1. So right now, what we're working on with Christy and soon to be our middle school principals and Corey Harris, the director of middle schools, is what can we do to reverse this trend, because this is going in the opposite direction. So even though more kids are successful once they're in that Algebra 1 course, it's not trending in the right way on who we're inviting in to that course, because we want to eventually have Algebra 1 be the standard for everyone by 8th grade. So looking at participation by subgroup, when you look at the ELL and special education, the group was so small that it did not constitute a subgroup. That's why you'll see an NA there. Looking at Algebra 1 completions by subgroup, again, you can see that the data is trending in the right direction, but to be honest, I'm not really satisfied with, even though our kids are doing better, if we're keeping kids out, I don't know that that's something to celebrate. So this is an issue, again, as I said, that we're going to be addressing heavily in the coming weeks. Looking at our 6th through 8th grade math proficiency on Iowa assessments by subgroup, we do have some celebrations here where we saw every single subgroup increase in their proficiency. So our most notable gains were in our ELL population, our English language learners. They were close to 8% gain over the 3-year period, and our African Americans, which were close to 7% gain over a 3-year period. Looking at that same subgroup data for typical growth, we did see, with the exception of multiracial, we did see increase in all subgroups of typical growth over a 3-year period. Again, our most notable gains were in our ELL population, right around 15% of students meeting those typical growth goals, and African Americans, an increase of about 8% meeting those typical growth goals.
And again, the years that can be compared there are 13 to 15.
That's the most valid comparison.
Correct.
This graph is a little bit confusing if it's the first time you're seeing it, but essentially what it looks at is the makeup of our African American population and compares it to the achievement over time. So essentially, about 88.5% of our African American students were either ELL or qualified for free and reduced lunch. And that percentage continues to grow over time. But even as the percentage grows, we've seen an increase of 6.7% in proficiency. So we feel like that's something to celebrate because as the population becomes more diverse and has more challenges presented, we're still seeing an improvement in achievement. Looking at our Hispanic subgroup, this is the one subgroup who actually isn't trending in the same direction as far as the makeup of the population, but we have close to 90% of our Hispanic students are either ELL or receiving free and reduced lunch. And over time, over the past 3 years, we have increased their proficiency by about 5.2%. And the last subgroup we want to look at is our Asian population. We are about 80% of our Asian population are students who are either ELL or free and reduced lunch and/or free and reduced lunch. And we've seen over the 3-year period about a 5.7% increase in student achievement within that Asian subgroup. And this is a subgroup that's probably seen the most significant changes over time as far as the makeup. The last graph that I want to show you is an additional data point that we started adding when we actually started with middle school literacy was, of course, we want to raise the floor for all of our students, but we also want to look at raising the ceiling. And so are we also advancing our students who are hitting that advanced category? So do we have more kids over time reaching advanced levels? According to this data, in 2012, we had only about 287 students district-wide who were reaching advanced categories on the Iowa assessment. And over a 3-year period of time, we've increased that exponentially to about 531. So it's not quite as significant as the gains that we saw in our literacy data, but needless to say, it is going in the right direction with the most notable gains in our free and reduced lunch population. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk about some of our responses as a system to these data.
Yeah, so this will be another section that applies to math and to science. And we actually talked about it during the literacy report. However, we felt like we needed to go a little deeper and provide a little more background information on sort of the 3 major district initiatives, rather than just spout them off, which we did last time. So I'll do this just once. If you'll start at the top, the notion of universal core and strengthening universal core really has 3 district-wide focus areas. And the first one is the instructional framework. And the whole notion of the instructional framework is that we can begin to utilize a common language regarding instruction that is coherent and aligned to the language we use regarding effective leadership, for example, at the building and also at the district level. It also defines what effective teaching is and will allow us as a system to provide actionable feedback and to really shift our emphasis as a system to a growth mindset regarding instruction. So there's the brief summary around the instructional framework, which you'll see woven throughout every content area. The second bullet point is related to core classroom instruction, and there are really sort of two pieces of that. There's academic instruction and there's behavior instruction. And the driver there through our MTSS system is a few grants. Now, Tom would say one of them actually isn't a grant, and he's accurate. But I want to point to this notion that we really feel like we need to strengthen the core, and the core is what all students are receiving. And we will be satisfied, might be a strong word, but we'll be happier when 80% of our students are successful with the core instruction in behavior and academics. And as you can see, we're not there yet in most cases. So the three drivers really of that are the Wallace Grant, which is intended to improve the capacity of our principals to lead, instructionally lead their buildings. The second is, and this is the one Tom will say is not a grant, is the TLC grant that drives classroom level instructional improvements through teacher leaders. And the third one is the School Climate Transformation Grant, which really focuses on the behavior side of that equation. And so those three are working in concert to affect core instruction in academics and behavior. And then the third bullet there is around standards reference grading, which to summarize is a fair, accurate, and specific with timely information regarding student progress towards learning that's grounded in standards. Again, a theme here you'll hear is a key piece of that is feedback and a growth mindset. So not unlike what we talk about in terms of the instructional framework. You know, I believe that standards reference grading began in the middle schools and now is working its way both directions 4th and 5th grade to elementary, and now 9th and 10th in high school. So there's a little more detail on those first 3 bullet points, and Christy will explain the others.
Hello, I'm Christy Dahl, the Secondary Math Curriculum Coordinator. And the next bullet point really talks to our work that I've done in partnership with our special ed folks and our ELL folks, and really helping to identify what are those key standards our students need to help them close that gap, instead of helping us target that instruction, instead of trying to reteach everything. So we really want them to get to Algebra 1. How do we do that? What standards are most important to help kids get there? So we've really been working in a partnership together to help them achieve that and target their instruction for teachers. Another piece has been our new materials in middle school. This year we implemented Glencoe Math with a lot of technology as well. So you will start to see teachers using their interactive projectors and using student devices in the classroom through the use of our Connect Ed website, which provides lots of resources to students and their families besides the teachers. And we'll give teachers support as they continue to try to differentiate for our students and provide them individualized instruction. It's really lending more towards that blending learning environment that we're heading to, and teachers are quite excited as they continue to work with these new materials and see the possibilities for our students. Probably a new term that you'll hear about is ALEX. ALEX is a computer software program that came along with our adoption. There's a certain level that all students have access to, and then we're also using it for intervention in middle school. It's a computer adaptive software, allows students to see exactly where they are at, provides them time and some instruction to continue to work at where they are and move them forward. It provides data to our teachers and seeing real quickly what students are still working on these skills, which allows them to do some small group instruction and have the data at their fingertips. Along with, there has been an increase refocus on our mathematical practice standards. In math, we have our content standards, but we also have our mathematical practice standards, which we have 8 of those, like persevere in problem solving. There's those skills that are a little harder to quantify, but it's important for students to practice, and helping teachers help students to practice those standards. Our new materials does a really nice job providing some further support to our teachers in instruction around those practice standards that they haven't had before. So you're seeing a greater focus as you go into the classrooms and with the work on those practice standards. And then one other is meaningful distributed practice and problem-based instruction, which comes from the Iowa Core. So again, looking at our data points, what can we practice for a few minutes every day to continue that meaningful distributed practice, and diving into tasks which are problem-based, which brings in those mathematical practice standards as well. So just a re-emphasis in our instructional strategies.
At this time, we'd like to open it up for questions or discussion.
And I have one community member who's asked to speak on this item, Andrew Rasmussen.
Board members, as you look over this information, I would just want to push you a little bit and hope that you ask for details on student learning that go beyond data on state standardized test scores and growth in test scores, although we're very excited to see that there's growth in a lot of areas there. I want to push you to ask questions about other ways that learning can be demonstrated by students that is probably more important than a standardized test score. What might be better ways that you can see that learning up close and personal? As a teacher, I know many different ways I can see learning from students. So I hope you break out of the state test score framework that we've been stuck in since 2001 or before, really. I think standards reference grading is going to help provide a little bit better data on things like that. But I want you guys to kind of think about what other ways do you want to see as board members learning reported and shown, so that we can have a even broader picture of what our students are learning. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments from board members? Cindy?
When we go back to, you were talking about the participation in Algebra 1 in 8th grade by subgroup and talking about the state criteria that doesn't allow entrance into Algebra 1, and that you'll be addressing that in the next couple of weeks. I assume that that's internal, things that you'll be doing internally to circumvent those criteria?
I wouldn't use that word.
Okay, well,
Out loud.
you'll do what you
Out
need
loud.
to do out loud. What I want to know is what can we do externally?
Well, when we've talked about our legislative agendas, we've often talked about flexibility, and with the push that this board has supported, we have seen in the last 2 years a little bit more flexibility in how we can use our dropout prevention funding and our at-risk funding. So I think continually, I'm going to reference the comment Tim made earlier. I don't refer to the Teacher Leadership and Compensation Grant as a grant. They really just took our general funding and earmarked it, which restricted its use. It was being used well, but it really limited what we could do. And so anytime restrictions are placed on us on how we do our business, and the goals are great, but we've demonstrated time and time again, if we provide the right supports and open the right doors for more of our students, they absolutely can raise to the challenge. So really the last thing that we need when we're trying to meet students exactly where they are and accelerate their performance are restrictions on what opportunities we can provide them. So the more the board and the community can advocate to the governor and to the legislature that this community is the experts with our kids, and we absolutely have their best interests at heart. So take the rules away. We're not going to pass a student through the system who hasn't mastered the content that we've claimed that they've mastered, but don't prevent us the opportunity to help accelerate performance for these students, because it disproportionately affects the students that we most need to help and who most need to see that they're capable of more challenging coursework. We've seen that demonstrated in spades with our AP initiative. Why they put handcuffs on when it comes to algebra at 8th grade, which is absolutely where the standard needs to be for our students, is I think just poor policy, state policy.
Maybe one more thing, just for the benefit of everyone, when we talk about our Asian subgroup having the most significant changes in their makeup, maybe just a little more elaboration on that, just so for everyone to hear.
I can't speak to the exact numbers of what the makeup is of but when we think about traditionally the Asian makeup of our students, that has shifted over time. It's a significantly larger number of ELL students now in that pot. So while it's not your traditional Asian students who have gone through the system maybe 10, 15 years ago, a large majority of us are coming from other countries. English is our second language. They come with significant challenges, refugee students. And so that presents us new opportunities to meet their needs in various ways. But I think sometimes traditionally when we look at an Asian label for a subgroup, we maybe make some assumptions that are faulty.
Yeah, for instance, our most frequent country of birth besides the United States is Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. We've taken in hundreds and hundreds of refugees from Burma. Those are all in that Asian population, not native English speakers, and most of them that we've gotten from the refugee camps certainly not literate in their home language. So that's a very different twist to what I think a lot of people consider would be our typical Asian subgroup population.
Go ahead, Terry. I was just going to ask when we're talking about subgroups, I know you say it's ELL and free and reduced lunch. Mm-hmm. So is there some benefit to see just pure ELL?
We can absolutely break it up that way.
Because when you see the difference in the Asian, and it's the same thing in the African American, because you have a lot of refugees in that number 2 or any of the numbers. So I think it's just pure ELL, pure free and reduced lunch. So because it does make an impact. And so I don't know if it gives a better, I'll offer that up if people would like to see it that way. I think it helps clarify the question you brought up, so.
We can absolutely break it up that way.
You done?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back to the point that Cindy raised about Algebra 1, and I definitely think that that's aspirational when it comes to KPIs, and I think it creates the expectation that we should have for every single student. But my question is, to the extent that things don't change, do we need to readdress that KPI? Because I'm concerned that if that continues to be the bar, and we have a large percentage of our students that don't have the opportunity to take advantage of that range of coursework, then it's really not a good indicator, I guess.
Well, I would have to actually disagree with that because it was your call for that data point that caused us to examine that issue. So truthfully, I don't know that we would have paid attention to that had it not been called for. And so that's a data point that I think we need to monitor anyway. And your point is well taken about kind of that gatekeeper. However, we don't believe we've exhausted all efforts, that we can continue to do some things on our end to change that number, because I don't think that state guidelines should be our excuse. I think we can still do better. I think we're going to hit a wall eventually, but I don't think we've hit that wall yet. So I would suggest that we keep it on there because that's an important data point for us to.
I agree. I think it's just more cautionary than anything, and to keep that always in front of us so that we're not creating an expectation for ourselves that ultimately we may or may not be able to meet, and being held accountable for it at the same time.
That's fair.
Yeah. Another comment around the C grade and the 6 to 8 proficiency. There seems to me to be a bit of a disconnect there. So we have a fairly large percentage of those students completing Algebra 1 with a C or higher. But if you look at proficiency based on the assessment, our proficiency levels are low. So am I to assume that we're really not comparing apples to apples in those two charts, in those two pieces of data?
So when we look at the students in 8th grade, those are only 8th graders who are enrolled in Algebra 1. How are they performing in Algebra 1?
Okay.
So then when we look
the
at general...
end of 8th grade.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
then when we look at general proficiency, we're actually looking at all
6 to
students.
8.
So those kids are
Gotcha.
in that data set, but we're actually looking at our highest achieving kids who are in Algebra 1.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It just begs another question, but I'm sure you know what that one is, so I won't ask it. And then my only other comment sort of went to what Connie said around sort of disaggregating the ELL and the other subgroups, and then understanding the number of students in the pool. So we have percentages here, but I don't really even know the universe that we're dealing with. I see the percentages, but understanding the number of students that are actually considered in the pool would be helpful to me.
So would it be helpful to see numbers and percentages?
I think so.
We can do that.
I think so.
I'm fairly certain our data folks have those numbers anyway. That's how they get their percentages, so we can provide that.
Okay.
I guess I have it.
Go ahead.
To Andrew's point about how do we assess, how we can look at another assessment. You know, we've all said, I know there are some other measures, but it's a matter of implementing it for our district, and how do we do that? So is there some measure that is out there that we could get really accurate data to help form how things are going based not on the Iowa assessment, but on some form of assessment that we have?
We are piloting the MAPS assessment at McCombs Middle School and at 2 of our elementary schools presently. And we're going to evaluate what information we get from that assessment and decide whether we think that investment is worth having a second duplicate assessment, because again, whatever we choose that we think meets our purposes the best does not excuse us from having to give the Iowa assessment. So then you're starting to talk about lost instructional time due to assessment. The other piece that we're very confident it finally is going to change is that the Iowa assessments likely will be in their last year this year. And then we'll be shifting to the smarter balance. That's not 100% final, but it sounds very, very likely now. So we'll be shifting our state assessment likely in FY17, which again changes, we have to reevaluate our entire assessment system based on what the state assessment is, so we're not duplicating effort and not gathering the same sets of data twice. So yes, we're exploring the maps, and we may expand use of that after we evaluate the quality of the data and how that can best meet our needs, and then try to balance that with the total investment we're making in not just dollars, but student and teacher time in administering those assessments.
I know that's always been a concern about how much testing are we doing, so
Right.
when you have to take the one, it makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
Well, and to Andrew's point with our work with standards reference grading, and we're not confident yet that we're fully there, but our grade distribution and the Tableau reports that I showed you a few times ago that we were here, I think that's going to be a really good indicator, because when we look at a body of evidence of learning, it includes projects and speeches and performances and different ways to truly measure authentic learning experiences. That's difficult when we talk about the purpose of monitoring. So that's why when we look at monitoring reports, that usually falls to some kind of external high-stakes assessment. But on the formative and the data that our teachers use on a regular basis and our schools use, it's much closer to the classroom in those performance tasks or those types of things. We're not there yet, but that's the system that we're working toward.
And that could be part of our
Correct.
new key
Absolutely.
indicators.
Yes.
That could be
Absolutely.
part of
And
it.
that's
But
going to
we
be
need
our
have a
most
trend,
meaningful
too.
data, because we'll be able to say, drill down exactly where we are in student learning of standards.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. Oh, sorry. You mentioned the Glencoe math. How long have you been using that?
That is new this year.
I just wondered what kind of support were the teachers given for that new system?
We have worked in having different avenues for teachers to receive professional development. We tried some new things this year. So before they left for summer, actually starting in the spring, they had an opportunity for professional development through an online course through the company itself, doing some work that way. Then they had face-to-face instruction over the summer. They're continuing with some online options again this year, as well as some opportunities on EQPD Day, as well as some virtual support sessions, which I'm trying new this year, where we Skype in and I provide some demonstration for them and answer questions, and then providing support out in the buildings as well as they're implementing and through their PLC time.
And then how long do you think you might use this program, I guess? Do you have any idea? Or it won't be something new next year, obviously. Okay.
No, it was a significant investment, and so we're in it for a while. And the nice thing is now the new materials are aligned to the core, so we don't anticipate that changing anytime soon. And I will say, Christy won't say this, but she has developed a really comprehensive support plan for teachers with multiple entry points. So it allows us to differentiate our support, because some teachers don't want to sit through 6 hours of training if they're feeling really comfortable. So Christy has developed kind of a blended approach, a face-to-face approach, so teachers can select their learning style and say, this is what I'm struggling with, so I'm just going to opt into this piece of it and maybe not the full gamut. So we've come a long way in how we're supporting teachers with the implementation of materials, and Christy is really kind of leading the way with that.
I have one other question, I'm sorry.
Please, Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
You know, I'm always big on building blocks, and math is one of those things where there clearly are building blocks, elementary to middle, middle to high. And, you know, when we begin to think about this notion of sort of our expectation is the Algebra 1, what are we doing across the system to figure out better interventions early that really prepare our students to be able to excel and move in the direction we need them to, especially given our high expectations and these aspirational goals that we set for ourselves?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because it allows us to kind of talk about what our vision is for intervention. So obviously the most important thing we do is strengthen core, but let's set that aside for a minute. So one thing, and Christy's kind of been chomping at the bit to do this for quite some time, and we haven't been in a position to do so, but we're starting it this year.
That's been, it was one of the first discussions that Christy and I had when she started.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if I may, just real quickly, just to help people understand where we've come as a system in regards to math, was it 4 years ago, Barb, that you were the only math coordinator for the entire district? Yeah, and then she went on to take some building leadership roles, and I think it was it 3 years ago, we really said, we just, that one person isn't adequate to do this, and so we split the coordinator role to an elementary and secondary. But Christy and I have talked numerous times, and there are plans that they'll share with you about back mapping from Algebra 1 at 8th grade, where are the priority standards that we need to really make sure we have solidly, even starting at kindergarten, to make sure that we enable that genuine opportunity for more kids at 8th grade. Sorry.
Right, and so once we have those big rocks and we say, what does a kindergartner need to absolutely master to be on track for Algebra 1? What does a first grader absolutely need to master? And then we strategically design our interventions around that, because what we're currently doing is we're trying to intervene on everything. And so we're kind of living in this, people were working really, really hard, and it's still that coverage of content. We got to get kids to mastery of skills, but the only way to do that is to reduce. So that reduction happens of what are those key building blocks, as you said, to Algebra 1, and by God, that is where we're going to put all of our energy, all of our attention, and you're not leaving my classroom until you've mastered those things. And so building our interventions around that, I think, is going to have a really powerful effect over time.
I just have one more question. Do you have opportunities for students to go even above that? I mean,
You want to talk about level 4?
Yeah, we have embedded opportunities with our level 4 opportunities through SRG. So every student has that opportunity to work at above and beyond our grade level standards through those rigorous task designs that I'm sure you'll hear more about as we continue with our SRG work. So that's built into our classes every day.
but it's the same class, so they're not going to be advanced a level or two, or I mean, they are within the class. Is that what you're saying?
Well, in middle school, we do have our accelerated pathway, which is all of 6th grade and half of 7th grade year.
Mm-hmm.
That year 1. Year 2 is half of 7th grade, all of 8th grade, and then year 3 is Algebra 1. So that's the accelerated pathway.
Okay.
Any further questions, comments? I have a few from Natasha, but I'm not going to read them all right now. I think what I'll do is I'll make sure that Tom has them and he can get questions answered by the three of you. Same thing for the middle school science monitoring report if she's not back for that presentation. So in the interest of moving things along, there is an action on this item, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So do I have a motion?
I move that we accept this, accept this monitoring report.
And a second?
I'll second. Okay.
Motion by Ms. Ellsburn, second by Ms. Anderson. Please vote.
Oops.
Motion passes 6-0. The report is accepted. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christy.
Some slight musical chairs.
That's right.
Just one. And our next item is our report on middle school science monitoring. And I will turn it over to two familiar faces.
Also, I'll also just add that because of the organizational meeting at our last meeting, we delayed the math report. So that's why you're getting two student achievement monitoring reports in the same evening. Having two tonight will allow us to stay on track for the rest of the fiscal year with the monitoring reports. But we thought it was probably one of these reports was too much for the first meeting for new board members, and we had lots of other non-routine business to take care of at the last meeting. So that's why we've doubled up. This won't be typical.
So I'll introduce this report differently than the last one. The first is to say that as a set, the science, math, and the literacy report from about a month ago now, as a set, those three reports tell a pretty thorough picture of learning in middle school. So I would encourage you to, at some point, sit down with the three of them. It tells a great story. The second is we really have to give the credit for the success that those three reports illustrate to the schools. We didn't get that work done. We're not leading students on a daily basis. It is really the instructional leadership focus of the principals and the lead teams and the relentless pursuit of growing in their instructional capacity of our staff in middle school. So I absolutely have to point that out. They're the heroes of this data. And the last is Adam Puderbaugh has joined us. Go ahead, Noelle.
Okay. All right, so for science, middle school science, our KPIs, or our key performance indicators, again, are the percent of students proficient on the state accountability test, which in this case is Iowa assessments in 6th through 8th grade, and then looking at the percent of students making or exceeding typical growth. And then just as you saw in the math report, we will dig into some subgroup data and some advanced numbers as well. Again, just to review our definitions of proficient, percent proficient is the percentage of students meeting that bar set by the state. And typical growth is looking at the students who met those typical growth goals for a 1 year's time. Looking at our trend over time, 3 years of science on our Iowa assessments, we are looking at a gain of about 7.19% from 2012 to 2015, from about 54% to almost 62%. Looking at our students for also collapsed grades 6 through 8, our students who are making at least typical growth. Looking at from 2013 to 2015, from about 58 to close to 61%. And again, we know that 2014 is a bit of an anomaly because that's the year that we saw the form change. So really apples to apples is 13 to 15. Looking at our support data by subgroup, again, we were pleased to see that all subgroups demonstrated notable gains over a 3-year period of time, with the most significant gains in our multiracial, Asian, ELL, and free and reduced subgroups, ranging from 8% to 11% gains. Looking at typical growth for those same subgroups, typical growth increased across the board as well for all of our subgroups. Our most notable gains were in our special ed population, about 5% gains, and Hispanic was close behind at 4.36%. Again, it's most valid to compare 13 to 15. Digging a little deeper, again, this is a similar graph to what we showed you before. We're trying to keep the format the same so that you don't have to spend all your time interpreting the graph. We can focus on the numbers. But looking at our African American subgroup, we had about 88.5% of our students, again, in ELL or free and reduced lunch. And while that population continues to change, we've seen an increase of almost 8% over the past 3 years. We are seeing the same trend with our Hispanic students. Digging into the breakdown, we have about 90% of our Hispanic students are qualify for free and reduced lunch or ELL, and achievement has increased by about 8% over the 3-year period of time. Our Asian subgroups, we're seeing an increase of about 11% over time. So this is a pretty notable gain from 2012 to 2015. And again, even though we're seeing some nice gains, we're still not anywhere close to where we want to be. But we're heading in the right direction at close to 50% in 2015. Looking at our number of students reaching advanced level on Iowa assessments in science, we have seen a pretty decent jump when you look at the 3-year trend from 2012 to 2015, but a little bit up and down in between. So We're trying to draw some conclusions from that. We're not sure at this point what that data is telling us, especially since all other data in middle school is trending pretty significantly in favor of our advanced students. So this is something that we're going to continue to dig in. The NAs, again, are such a small number that they don't constitute a subgroup for this information. But you can see the breakdown, again, free and reduced, all the way down, all the different subgroups, what that data looks like over that 3-year period of time. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Puderbaugh, and he will discuss our response to the data. Actually, Tim, I think you were going to do some of this as well, right?
I was not, because
Okay,
of the same
Adam.
as the first time.
Okay. All right. Good evening. My name's Adam Puderbaugh. I'm the K-12 Science Coordinator, fighting a little bit of a cold, so if I sound like Kermit the Frog at any point in time, just let me know and we'll move on from there. So as Tim mentioned earlier, with responses to data, there's this initial things with instructional framework, with the Wallace Grant, the Instructional Coach Program, and standards reference grading that he addressed earlier with math. And I'm going to talk about the few things that are unique to science and then open it up for some questions. So a couple of things that I want to highlight what we're doing for our science teachers at the middle school level. And there's a more detailed account of this in your report than that's on the screen. But one thing I want to talk about is our SIMBI partnership. The SIMBI program is a National Science Foundation funded grant in a partnership with Iowa State University. We've been partnered with them over the last 6 years, and we place graduate students in engineering and sciences into our middle school classrooms to work one-on-one with our students and with their teachers. Over the last 6 years, we've had 42 middle school classrooms benefit from this, and we currently have 12 placements in the district right now. So that's been a great program. Also, another program that's also an additional partnership with Iowa State University is the Seabrook Summer Academy, and this is a professional development experience that we focus explicitly on middle school science teachers. It's a 3-week program during the summer where we expose teachers to cutting-edge research. We also give them an intensive professional development experience where they can take a lot of their learnings back to their classroom. Another big push that I am championing is a vertical aligned professional development. Our middle school and high school groups need to be able to communicate with each other, and I'm allotting specific time during our district PLC days for that to happen so we can have those vertical conversations and that people can build partnerships in our feeder patterns. Some new news about our curriculum standards, and I talked a little bit about this with the elementary report earlier this year, but the state did adopt new science standards, and they are in the process of rolling out those modules. We have a fairly long implementation plan with full implementation taking someplace in 2018, so it's kind of a slow process, but we want to make sure that we go slowly and get it right, and that's going to have some significant changes. The biggest change for us is we already have an integrated pattern in our middle schools with middle school science, so we have a balance of physical, life, and earth science, which is nice because that's what the state adopted finally, and we will have some slight curricular changes, but nothing major, which is really good news. A lot of districts are facing some major changes because they've siloed their disciplines as like earth science for 6th grade, physical science for 7th, and life for 8th. And they've had to do some major upheavals in other districts, but we were ahead of the ball in that situation, so that's helped out considerably. There is a new push with science standards that they're performance expectations. So that meaning that the students are directly engaged in science and engineering practices and making connections to cross-cutting concepts between disciplines. That looks different, and that's going to be a key piece of professional development for those teachers around those new standards. So changing the way we do business a little bit in those classrooms. A couple science enrichment activities that we're continuing to go through with the middle school students. Science fair. We have a lovely participant level in statewide science fair and in our city science fair that takes place each February down at the Science Center. 600 students participating in science fair with a significant number, 128 going to the state level. So a lot of kids participating in that, a lot of very good experience integrating in some really neat research. Also, Define STEM is a new program that we've just got access to through our AEA. It's a pretty neat program. It's a science resource website that helps teachers develop level 4 activities in their classroom, and it has a very solid approach with STEM career fields, offering videos of STEM careers and in these nice holistic applications of STEM activities. So whether they're working as an aquarium designer or a backpack designer, or these nice authentic tasks that teachers can use and engage their students with, and it's really neat, and we just recently gained access to that. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
I guess you mentioned the vertical alignment. Can you give an example of how you're doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's teacher-driven more than me making them do it. I want to foster the connections that they naturally see. So for instance, our chemistry teachers working with our 7th grade science teachers on what types of activities they're doing in their classroom that's going to prepare them later on, because that's an area where there's a lot of chemistry that takes place. But also, how do we share equipment? How do we share experiences? How do we prepare students for the next level? And that's just one example of that.
Does it go down to the elementary?
We currently don't have that scheduled, but that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
However, you weren't privy to this monitoring report for elementary science, but there's tremendous opportunities developed for our elementary teachers around STEM and science instruction, which are really pretty phenomenal, which we can give you an update on at a later time.
Okay.
What is proficient in science?
It's a great question. Do we know how we define that, other than the state setting a bar, saying this is the bar for proficient, but what does that look like in expectations?
Yeah, or what's the knowledge base, or, I mean, what should I be able to
Yeah. We have our set of
demonstrate?
standards. We have our banded standards for middle school, to say, here's what kids need to know and be able to do by 8th grade. So we do have that. Again, alignment has been a real challenge for us with the current state assessment, but knowing that is, well, science, maybe not so much. We're looking at other ways to assess where our students are.
Yeah, with the new standards, we do need to look at assessment. The current Iowa assessment is not aligned to the new standards, but there hasn't been an assessment developed for the new standards yet. Illinois is working on one, and a couple other people are working on assessments, so we'll see as we move forward in that implementation what's available.
Yeah, it seems to me with all of the emphasis around STEM that there would really be a more laser focus on.
Oh, we are laser focused,
No, not us, but
nationally.
Yeah.
And they are,
That
is. And the framework for science education and the next generation science standards have a laser-like focus and I can dig into the hundreds of pages with you at some point and show you all these things that are going on. But you're right. I mean, how we currently evaluate proficiency with our Iowa assessment is not the best way, and we need to be actively searching for better ways.
Yeah, okay. And then when you talk about advanced level, number of students reaching advanced level, what's that? I mean,
Also defined by the Iowa assessment.
Okay.
So the advanced level is the top tier
Right.
of proficiency on the Iowa assessment.
Is that the same for the math?
Yeah. Correct.
As well?
Higher cut score.
Yeah, so right.
Okay. So I was looking at the number of students reaching advanced level on the Iowa assessment, and what's the total number of 6-8 students that we have in the district compared to the number that have achieved the advanced level on Iowa assessments?
6,000?
Yeah, I was going to
6,000?
estimate 6,000, but we would have to
Sorry
get
about
those
that.
hard numbers. It's about 2,000 per grade level typically.
Oh, so that is low,
It is.
really low.
We definitely have some room for growth.
Yeah, well, and it also really points up even beyond that, if you look at the subgroup data, the fact that, I mean, we have subgroups that are significantly, I mean, they're struggling to get to that level. So again, trying to figure out ways we create the expectation and raise the bar for everyone. Yeah.
And that we have a lot of work to do in elementary as well, because traditionally speaking, over time, through No Child Left Behind and all these different mandates, science has fallen off the radar within a lot of classrooms. And so expecting students to come into sixth grade and just be ready to launch into advanced work.
Right.
Teachers are spending a lot of time on foundational things that should have happened prior to them coming. So, and I don't blame elementary teachers either. You know, they're living in their mandate world as well. So, but that's a shift that we have to make, and we're starting to make. And these new standards are an opportunity to kind of restart that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we keep that sort of in the back of our minds so that we really can put this in the proper context. And then my only other question is, you referenced the science fair participation as sort of a response to the data. Do we have any sense of the breakdown by subgroup of participation in science fairs of those 600 plus students across the district that are engaged?
I could get that to you. I don't have it with me currently.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be helpful because I think that could help us reflect back on the low numbers of students that are registering on the advanced level as well. So just helping me to connect the dots. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with the science fair, do the teachers have support for that as far as, because usually, I mean, I know from previous work with that, it was kind of above and beyond your like contract hours or whatever, which is normal, but are you giving them more support to provide those extra opportunities for science fair? I don't know, I just wondered.
It depends on what you're referring to as support. If it's financial support, no, the budget is tight. But things that we are doing is we're focusing how we're integrating science fair into our current instruction and being very, just much more intentional with how students choose science fair ideas and to make sure that it's in line with our curriculum goals and our science fair goals. So that's one way that we're making it more efficient use of the time.
Okay.
Ms. Langford.
Yeah, I just had a quick clarifying question. Wow. So when you were talking about that advanced tier that students are testing proficient on the Iowa assessments, is there any correlation then to students taking that curriculum in classrooms? Is that a clear question? So is the Iowa assessment data that labels students as advanced, is that reflective of access for students in the classroom to those advanced science classes? Or is that just on the Iowa assessments?
That's an Iowa assessment data point.
That's what we're looking at. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yes.
So that's not reflective of all those subgroups who are represented taking advanced classes in science across the district.
There are no advanced middle school science classes. So performing at the advanced level is different than an advanced science class. So unlike math, where there is an advanced track, I'll call it, in all the other subject matters, there is no advanced course difference. And as was illustrated earlier by Christy, actually before she went back, the level 4 tasks through SRG are embedded in every course, so every student has access to rigorous science tasks, English tasks, social studies tasks, etc.
So to give you some context, we're calling it embedded honors. So what we did historically was we would skim off the top and say these 25 kids, we're going to peel off the top and give them an advanced class, although we didn't really have what defined that advanced class. We just kind of grouped them together and it was an advanced class. So instead of saying we're going to serve these 22 to 25 kids in an advanced class, the shift that we've made is we've said we're going to do an embedded honors, which means we're going to bring advanced opportunities to all kids in every classroom so that all kids can access advanced opportunities versus predetermining ahead of time, you're getting an advanced experience and you're not getting an advanced experience. And so we've done that. It was most pronounced in literacy because we didn't have a lot of advanced classes for science, period. I think we had Harding Middle School maybe that was offering one advanced class, but that wasn't across the board. And so by doing that, we've actually tripled the number of students reaching advanced levels for our literacy, for example. So we want to continue to dig into that embedded honors approach for science, knowing that we're not seeing as significant a trend as we are seeing in some of our other subject areas.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Yeah, my only other question goes to the comment that Ms. Anderson raised around the access to resources and its impact on student participation, especially in science fairs and related activities. So I would just offer that, I think that there are probably, enough organizations and entities in the community that can support students that don't have access to those resources and are interested in participating. A great place to do that, we've got a 21st Century After School program that's a middle school program aligned with Callanan Middle School. Right. And we could certainly support the needs of those students in helping them to pursue those opportunities. And I'm sure that's replicated time and time again. And I would hope that we wouldn't allow access to resources to impact a student's desire to want to fully and completely participate, when that could totally be supported by community-based organizations and others. So I would definitely push that as a way that we get students engaged, because I think that once they sort of get the bug, I think they get excited about it. And when they think that they have the opportunity that maybe they didn't think they would, I think it just creates a whole different sort of new normal for them. So I definitely think that we should try to pursue as many of those external partnerships as we can to support those students.
Great point.
And we do. The comment about the financial support, I was inferring that you were meaning paying teachers for extra hours spent after school working on science fair. But we do work with community groups to get money for science fair, to pay for science fair materials, to pay for science fair busing. It's a fairly substantial amount of money that goes into science fair, and we want to make sure that we're using that money appropriately the best that we can.
And the Des Moines Public Schools Foundation also supports the middle school science fair.
Any additional questions? Comments? Just like with the last report, I had a couple questions from Natasha that I'll make sure you all get. Some of them have been answered, and I've written down the answers to those. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Boson, second by Ms. Caldwell-Johnson. Please vote. Motion passes 6-0. The report is accepted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to our next item, which is Human Resources Hiring Update. And we have Team HR coming up.
Good evening. Those of you board members that were here last fall remember that we gave a pretty comprehensive affirmative action and equity report, and in that we outlined goals and showed you demographic data and those kinds of things. Those were 2-year goals. So tonight is just kind of an informal update on where we are at the halfway mark on that. So you all received some materials and some information, and so hopefully for our new board members it was helpful for you to kind of get an idea of the history of our efforts here in this district. So last fall, we kind of began our effort we did a demographic survey. We found that we did not have accurate demographic data, so it's hard to set goals when you do not. So we did that, and it was really until last December that we found we actually knew what our hiring numbers needed to be. And so that resulted in our equity plan. Another thing that we did was a demographic survey. We took a look at the numbers, and we wanted to know a little bit more about those. We wanted to have a little bit more information about our quantitative data. So we hosted a minority staff that included teachers and administrators focus groups to kind of find out a little bit more about what it was like to teach and be employed by Des Moines Public Schools. And those were hosted sometime, I think we did a board report in January. And then we did, we revamped our hiring process. We gave that report to the board last year. And there was a big focus on hiring underrepresented groups. So we did training of all the administrative staff, so that's been part of our effort. Since my hire here a little over 2 years ago, it's been a major goal of our superintendent and of course all of you as board members that we increase our underrepresented groups and that we increase our efforts in hiring a more diverse staff to more closely resemble our student population. So what we're going to do tonight is just sort of a brief overview and then give you an opportunity to answer or ask some questions. So I want to talk just briefly about our quantitative goals. I want to point out a couple of highlights in the report that I submitted. Our total minority employees, we needed to increase from 17 to 20%, which would be 118 employees. And we actually increased by 71. So our goal for next June 16th is to hire an additional 47 people. With our minority teachers, our goals were to increase from 8.5% to 10%, which would be 44 teachers, and we actually increased by 20. So a goal would be, to finish up, would be 24. And again, just to remind you, this is just our halfway point. And then finally, an area where we need to work the hardest is increasing the number of minority administrators. And for us, that means by 9 administrators. So we had 1 person leave, so we need to hire an additional 8 people. So that's going to be a big focus for us. And some things that we have done, Sheila's going to tell you a little bit more about our action recruiting plan that we did not have in place. We've just developed that. So the progress we've made on our goals so far has really just been what we've done with our own efforts in collaborating district-wide, particularly with the Office of Schools. We didn't have the action plan. And so we've developed that over the summer and are putting that in place right now. And like I said, Sheila will tell you a little bit more about that. Other things we've done is I've been working with the Board of Educational Examiners, the director, on licensure requirements in the state of Iowa. So part of that group's plan for this year is to re-examine that. I happen to sit on that group, and I've met with D.T. McGee, the director, to talk a little bit about how restrictive Iowa requirements are for those administrators who have served successfully as an administrator in other parts of the United States but can't get licensed in Iowa. So we're working on that. That's an issue for Des Moines Public Schools, and we had 2 excellent candidates. We were not able to get licensed in this state.
Yeah, and you may, some of you may recall, I think Terry was involved in at least one of the interviews, but we had a gentleman that we really wanted to hire to be our chief academic officer 2 years ago. Very smart and talented, a guy who's had a storied career in both Kansas and Missouri, and actually held his PhD from Iowa State, and we could not get him licensed in Iowa. So we had to pass on him. But that's a real barrier.
It definitely is. And the Board of Educational Examiners and the director have been very, very proactive and very open to taking a look at that. Some changes were made for actually superintendent licensure a couple of years ago, and this would really just mirror that for principals. So there's a couple of different things that we can look at just from a licensure perspective. And then lastly, we worked closely with the Office of Schools in determining kind of a leadership pipeline, and we're working on that. That's part of our Wallace work. So we have quite a lot in place to be able to be more successful in hiring administrators of color as well. So from there, then I'm going to go ahead. Those were our, kind of just some highlights of our quantitative goals. And so Equity Coordinator Isaiah McGee is going to talk a little bit about our qualitative goals. And then we'll let Sheila talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of our recruiting action plan.
So in reference to our qualitative goals, in our affirmative action plan, there are 25 different subpoints represented in 6 different action areas in terms of our qualitative goals. And just as Dr. Sullivan mentioned before, the affirmative action plan is a 2-year plan. And so this kind of gives you an update on where we are in the process of completing a number of those action items. Rather than going through each of those 25 points, which might take a little while, what I'm going to do here is just highlight a few ones that I think are worth highlighting here this evening, and then also leave it up to you all if you have any specific ones you would like me to reference or talk about once we complete our report here. And so in the report that we presented to you, the 3 that I will just give me a second to highlight would be on number 2, which is the demographic study of the applicant pool, new hires, and current staff. And in that area, we completed a demographic survey. We've also went through, as Dr. Sullivan mentioned, and did a a focus group. We're planning on doing an additional focus group here this coming February as a follow-up to that, just to can see where things are from the last year when we did this to this year, and then to continue to provide different supports based off of the folks we talked to in that focus group. And the focus group it's focused specifically on teachers of color in the district. The other piece I will mention out is recommendation 5 in our qualitative goals, which is the employee professional development assistance, training selection, mentoring policies and practices. We're doing a number of different things just to make sure that our building leaders have that knowledge and the training that they need during the hiring process to make sure that they are functioning and responding in the most equitable ways possible. So we've provided them specific instruction and specific training around those areas, as well as district-wide, we're providing all of our leadership teams very specific and in-depth cultural proficiency training just around how we feel, what our philosophy is with cultural proficiency and what our framework is in the district and how to implement that throughout their buildings, including in the hiring practices. The last one I'll just mention is number 7, and Dr. Sullivan also mentioned that some of the work that we're doing with the BOEE to deal with some of the different barriers we have in hiring persons of color in leadership positions, but also in last May we relaunched our district educational equity advisory committee. That meeting, we established bylaws and officers for that meeting as well. We are scheduled to meet here in October. The committee meets quarterly, so 4 times a year. School year starts back up again, so we have scheduled a meeting for October 19th in this very room, and to begin some more in-depth work from that particular committee. And then going from there, hopefully the way it should be designed is by February be able to present to this body and to Superintendent Ahart a list of recommendations from that particular committee.
And then for the new members, I don't think I introduced, this is Isaiah McGee, our Equity Coordinator. This is Sheila Mason, Director of HR for our classified staff, and she'll tell you a little bit more about our recruiting action plan.
Good evening. I'm going to share just a few highlights of our recruitment plan for next year. With the beginning of the school year, the Office of Human Resources, in collaboration with the Offices of Academics, Schools, and Communications, selected a recruitment team that was committed to developing and implementing recruitment strategies aligned with our affirmative action goals. I want you to know, just on a personal level, this group has been steadfast committed to doing this work, and we are meeting regularly every 2 weeks, every week, whatever is needed to make this happen. So during the past few months, the recruitment team has accomplished several initiatives, and one of the things that we've done is developed a 2015-2016 recruitment schedule that includes historically black colleges and universities and emerging Hispanic serving institutions. As we speak, Tiffany O'Hara and Maureen Taylor are at the University of Arkansas in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and they are having dinner right now with the president, who agreed to host them for a dinner. So we're looking forward to them meeting tomorrow with the college visit and then coming back and telling us what their collaboration was about and what they learned from that experience. We've also identified event coordinators for each one of the events who will be responsible for selecting a recruitment team to go with them, also selecting the recruitment materials, and then also being responsible for all the communication between the school that we are visiting. Communication has been sent to leaders at several colleges and universities who offer educator preparation programs and/or school administrator preparation programs. This communication was sent to them requesting their partnership to build pipelines for teachers and leaders that could start a career with Des Moines Public Schools in the future. We've also identified several additional websites and publications that job postings will be sent to. We had a list, but we've enhanced that list so that we can cover more ground throughout the United States. We're working with local partners, for example. Evelyn K. Davis has just been phenomenal. They have consistently provided candidates for us to interview. They've set up interviews. They've assisted people with filling out resumes and filling out the application online. They've just been a partner side by side with us throughout this whole past year. We also work with them during the summer with their youth experience program, and we are hoping that in the future, working with those youth, that they will help us build future candidates for DMPS. In addition, several members of the district attend the Latino Forum every month, and through that collaboration, we're talking with them about job postings, answering any questions they have about our hiring process, and also collaborating with them on district initiatives that are underway. Lastly, we have been working with the Office of Communications and designing an event display, something that we can take to all of our events, and something that, you know, the message will be clear and be consistent with our marketing message throughout the district, and we hope that that will provide us a real dynamic presence at all the events that we attend. This has been a real exciting team to be a part of, and I hope that you will be able to join us at one of these events when your schedule allows. Throughout the next year. We're looking forward to sharing more information and results as we implement the recruitment plans throughout the year. And just in closing, Dr. Sullivan and Phil Rader will be meeting with you, sharing all the marketing information that we have. Hopefully we'll have a preview of the display that we're going to be using, and then they'll also have a copy of the recruitment schedule that will be following this year. Thank you.
And just to remind you, we have our annual educator fair, where we usually see about 700 potential teachers that attend that. And so that's going to be Saturday, January 9th, and it was awesome last year. I believe we had every board member there. It looks really impressive to have the board there. So we'll go ahead and like Sheila said, we will communicate with you about recruiting events that happen in-state and out-of-state. And we're really hoping that if your schedule allows, if you could be a part of that, it looks really impressive to have a board member there. I know you all work full-time, but we do want to extend that invitation because we're excited to have you on board and be a part of this effort. We'll entertain any questions that you have now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We have one member of the community who's asked to address the board on this issue. I call up Andrew Rasmussen, 313 Southeast Sharon.
Thank you. You remind me how to get home. Board members, I just wanted to point out one other thing. The DMEA is on board with this. We want to support hiring more minority teachers however we can. I think one of the things that we think is a real key is growing our own from the students that we teach. And so we had Isaiah reach out to me this summer, and we took a look at some National Education Association grants, and we put together a grant application to the Center for Great Public Schools for about $20,000?
About
$25,000, and we're hoping to hear back from them, but we're really excited to be able to support the Dream to Teach program to identify students who are interested in, minority students who are interested in teaching, and then being able to support them, being able to provide teachers who can be mentors for those kids. So we're really excited about supporting the district in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments or questions from the board? Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Thanks for this report. I've been looking forward to it based on all of the work that we've talked about over the course of the last year or so. And I thought I brought it with me, but I didn't. And so when I get back to my office tomorrow, I will make sure I forward it to you. But it is a list of the top maybe 20 historically black colleges and universities that have been identified by the teacher quality something in Washington, D.C. that are putting out teachers that meet their standards, but also programs that meet the guidelines that they've established for generating quality teachers. And it's probably information you already have, but I really did it just for my own personal learning. I'm an HBCU graduate, and I really am very interested in identifying ways that we can really partner. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I'd love to participate in any of those trips, because I truly believe that that's a great pipeline for us to identify teachers. And I have a personal friend that's the Dean of the College of Education at Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. And I would love to make a connection there because I think that's a great place for us to really begin to cultivate some folks.
Well, I'm glad you said that actually, because as part of this recruiting trips that we're doing and the teams that we're putting together, myself and a couple of other folks are going out to Central State University next week. I want to say on October 13th, 12th or 13th. So if you have some availability in your schedule, we would love for you to join along with us for that trip. We are trying to plan the same way. We're trying to plan some opportunities, not to just meet on campus, but also to maybe have lunch or dinner with some of the faculty and decision makers there at the university. One of the pieces behind the institutions that we chose is we tried to choose places that also reflected other data, which was that people tend to choose places to work in a relatively close to where they live or where they grew up. And so we kind of stretched the mark a little bit, but we tried to find places that really met 3 criteria. One was that they were an HBCU or an HSI or an emerging HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution, that they had a teacher prep program or had a strong emphasis on the teacher prep on teacher preparation, and then 3 that they were relatively regionally close to Iowa, and so that's why the 6 that we chose were chosen. That included Central State and a couple in Chicago, a couple in Missouri, and then. We also stretched it a little bit with Langston University, knowing that we had some connections there, as well as the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'd be happy to help, and I'll make sure I send that to you when I get to my office tomorrow. So I had another question just about the quantitative goals and then the information that was shared. So I see that we're making, fairly good progress on the goal, but say for instance, on the increase in the number of total minority employees, can you give us, and not tonight, but at your convenience, a breakout of those employees by classification so we sort of get a sense of where those are? And then under the total minority teachers, a breakout across, the varying ethnicities, that would be helpful. And then I just find it really interesting that the number of male classified staff decreased by 9. I know that we do some exit interviewing, right? Do we have a sense of, is that just sort of a blip on the radar screen, or is that sort of a natural trend that we've been seeing?
Well, do you want, go ahead.
Well, I mean, and keep in mind, this is across all the departments, so
Right.
transportation, food service, associates.
Classified staff. You're right.
Custodial. We have people that move out of state, we have people that retire, so there's just that natural transition. And without the numbers here and looking at the past years, I wouldn't be able to comment on it, but I can get you some information on
It's
that.
a very difficult place for males to work.
Yeah, coming from the top male in the district.
Well, and typically with things like teacher associates, custodial, food service for sure, before and after school care, we tend to draw more female employees for whatever reason. We get by way more applicants. So I don't know that, that's one of the things we have to track in terms of our affirmative action equity goals.
Right.
But do we see any big trend, or is the feedback we're getting showing us any trends? I can't say that it is.
I just think it's so important to have those strong male role models, especially sort of given the demographics in our district. So really trying to figure out ways that we can up our efforts around that.
And that was the reason, kind of like as Noel had mentioned when they did their presentation, that's one of those things that we wouldn't have caught unless we've actually decided to monitor that and place that on our plan in the first place.
And then my only other question really went to the footnote at the bottom: actual vacancies must occur for DMPS to be able to fill the positions. What was the total vacancies in 14-15 that made slots available for filling in 15-16? You may not have that in front of you.
I don't have it, but I can get that for you.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Not a problem.
Just so I can put sort of the level of activity into perspective.
Sure.
Thanks. Appreciate your efforts.
You bet.
Bozen.
When you're out going to colleges, only because Dream to Teach is kind of very important to me, Could we work on maybe obtaining some scholarships for those students?
Yes. Yes, actually, we have some great potential in those areas. One of the things that we did, so the kind of, before we actually had a specific recruiting plan, we had the affirmative action plan, and we had identified the institutions we were going to include in that. And then certain opportunities presented themselves via, there would be a conference here, a conference there, where it would be in the same city as some of these institutions. And when we were at, for instance, Chicago, another one being St. Louis. And so when we were out visiting those cities for other conferences, we also stopped by those colleges and just said, hey, here is something that we're working on. We're trying to also recruit, but also a second aspect of that really is to make it more a cyclical relationship. So we will also be interested in having some of our students have your institution be an option for them via this program. So a number of those institutions do have even some specific scholarships. Maybe not specific to Des Moines Public Schools, but they have some specific scholarship programs that would fit in very well with the Dream to Teach program. We're trying to figure out a way from a capacity standpoint that we can organize that aspect of it as well too. But the conversations have definitely been going on, not only for the out-of-state institutions, but even internally in-state as well too. Like with the University of Iowa, they've indicated that there may be some specific opportunities for our students who are in this or who are in the Dream to Teach program as well too. We recently have hired or had come to a partnership agreement with the Public Allies program, and they had to leave already, but those two individuals started yesterday, and then part of what they'll be doing in their role will be also to help with the capacity of our programs, both within the equity, or my office within equity, but also within some of our community partnership programs, including Dream to Teach as well too.
Thank you.
Also, those of you attending the Council for the Great City Schools Fall Conference, there will be two of our DMPS employees presenting on our Dream to Teach program.
Oh, good. Great.
That's great. Do you have additional comments, questions? No? I have one, which is I'm very glad that you mentioned the ongoing conversations with the Latino Forum, which are I think of benefit to both sides, absolutely, and necessary. And there's one aspect of those conversations that they've had, I know with you all to a certain extent, and also with Tom, about giving some weight or preference to candidates that come with a bicultural background, bilingual background, which is not something that we do currently, but certainly something that we should be doing. And I've been pleased to see the openness to that conversation and willingness to kind of explore this and figure out how to make it real here in DMPS.
One thing that we do when we review applications, we have a rubric and we give different weightings for different background. And so as we're working with, we're going to be working with a consultant at Battelle for Kids, and that's one of the things that will be a big part of our work, is how do you appropriately put that weighting in there for that somebody who has that background, who has that to offer our students. So that is absolutely part of the plan.
Yeah, I think the message that I consistently hear is, we don't get the job because we don't have the experience, but we're not going to get the experience if we don't get the opportunity. And what we bring are character and qualities that are not present in the current employer base at a great enough number. So very thankful to see where those conversations are going, and very excited to also to see what happens there.
And that's part of our work in collaborating with Dr. Ahart on his superintendent goal with a multi-data point hiring system that we're developing.
It actually hits, I think, 2 points of those goals. One, the multi-tier data point, but also even the cultural proficiency aspect of it too. Because as we try to push forward, a lot of the criticism or feedback is, well, you know, we can't hire people based off of characteristics or things like that. But what we're really doing, and even what's reflected within the affirmative action plan, is what we're focusing on the experiences that people are bringing to the table, particularly experiences that match up with the experiences that many of our students and their families have.
I appreciate it. Thank you. There's no further comment or question. I will ask for a motion. Or do we have it? No, this is just informational.
information.
Dang it, I thought I was going to make it through without a rookie mistake. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the chair's report. I will bring up, I was going to say I'm off to a good start in my first year as chair, but I just screwed up. So such is life. But I do want to note a couple of meetings that I've had in the last couple of weeks. One was with a group of students from a number of different schools across DMPS named Savvy, which is organized through Monsoon, the organization that assists Asian women and men with in domestic violence situations. It was an emotional meeting. We left with some good ideas and have appreciated the superintendent and his staff's willingness to meet with them on ways to address concerns that they've brought up within the district. I also enjoyed meeting with the East High ambassadors recently. Wonderful organization, good kids. Both East High ambassadors and Savvy are great examples of the very high quality of young people that DMPS serves every day. I was also fortunate to spend some time with my friends over at DMEA last week, and want to give an additional plug to their community conversation, which is coming up on October 29th at 5 p.m. These have been good opportunities for community members and staff and educators and everyone with an interest in the district to talk about where we are and where we're going, and that's a necessary part of the process. The board will meet in 2 weeks, and among the other items that we will be hearing will be a next monitoring report on high school reading for the 14-15 academic year. So that's my chair's report. Superintendent's report.
Thanks, Rob. We have quite a team from DMPS representing us at the Council for the Great City Schools annual fall conference. And if you look at what's happened at that fall conference over the last several years, we typically have 1 or 2 presentations featured from our district, and I think that speaks very highly to the innovative and creative and hard work that all of our staff puts in from really every area of the district. Also wanted to, again, recognize, we do have a large student body, true, but proportionately, having 14 National Merit Scholar finalists is impressive. And I can't document that yet this year because we don't have those numbers, but on a typical year, we have a disproportionately high number of students based on a percentage of our student population that earn that honor. So while we spend a lot of time, particularly in these monitoring reports, talking about the significant challenges that our teachers are confronting every single day, with a number of learning challenges, with a population that isn't resourced as well as we would all like, or that have language challenges because of immigration or refugee status, we are also doing an excellent job of serving students who are accelerated and well beyond their typical peers. So I just want to make sure that while we have a wide range of challenges, the challenges of the students who may be accelerated and maybe a little more talented, those bring challenges for our teachers as well. And our teachers continue to meet those challenges in a very remarkable way. So it was very fun to recognize 14 students, even though they all couldn't be here because they have very busy schedules as we do. I just want to make sure that we call that out because we have many challenges, but the students who are very high performers provide challenges for our teachers as well that are sometimes just as challenging to meet those needs. And I think we continue to do a nice job on both ends of the spectrum. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. And if there's nothing further, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.